Okay, I'd like to begin by first of all thanking Rosalind Jason for introducing me to Ashley. Rosalind, thank you very much, a very dear friend of mine. And before we start, I know, ladies, there are many Balchuva stories, but I think that this one is something very special. And I think for this one, you're going to have to fasten your seatbelts. And before I hand over to Ashley, who's going to take us back to Zululand, I look forward to hearing your story, Ashley.
Thank you. Thank you, Ros. Are we on?
We're on.
Okay.
Can we?
In just a minute, can I finish what I'm doing?
I'm going to mute you, and please do not unmute yourself till the end, and then you can unmute yourself for question and answers. Ashley, you will have to unmute yourself after I mute everybody.
Okay, come and help me. Can you switch the?
Ashley, I'm sorry, you got muted. Can you unmute yourself and ask me that question again? No, you have to unmute yourself first.
Okay.
Right.
Is there an alternative setup where I've got a second monitor that I can look into you with my eye line? So can you switch me into the other position, the B position? Let's just see that. I have a, will that work?
Avram's a co-host. If he wants to do that, he can. Avram, can you? Unmute you. He should be unmuted. He's a co-host.
What are you asking that it should do?
Avram, I've set up a second monitor. So if I can see myself in it, or
you want to see yourself on the big screen?
No, I don't want to see on the big screen. Okay, it's fine. Is everybody seeing me on the big screen, by the way?
Yes.
Okay, so
everybody's individual. If they click view at the top right-hand side and then they click on speaker view, you can see yourself on the big screen.
Try that for me. May I just
try and say it again?
Hey?
What did I do?
Where it says view, it's like a crown with 3 dots on top. It says speaker view. If you click on that, you will see yourself in full screen. If you click one below where it says gallery view, then you will see everybody. And to come out.
What to do?
Okay, in fact, I've got a better way. Is there any way you could center yourself on the screen?
No, they want to see you, not her. They're not going to see.
Please, Sunny, please. Can you move to your right slightly with your chair? Yeah, so that you're in the center of the screen. That's right. So my eye line is looking at you now.
Okay.
Am I looking at you now?
Yeah,
absolutely.
I see, yeah,
That's right. Sorry, I'm just cameraman in me.
Go ahead.
Okay, so
please do not.
Everybody. Firstly, I would really have to, and to the depths of my heart, sort of say thank you to Kodesh Baruch Hu, because the story you're about to hear, the story of what I went through and my family went through, is an amazing gift from Hashem. And when I was a younger person, you know, I wish I was young enough to have the knowledge when my grandchildren tell me, Grandpa, no, it's this way and it's this way. And I said, I wish I was young enough to have all the knowledge that you have. And they sort of look at me, they have to decode that. What I'm really saying to them is, you know, life teaches you other lessons. And I look back at the beginning of this journey and I'm in awe, in absolutely awe of the sort of trajectory that took me from total ignorance to a glimpse of what this is really all about. And I say that word glimpse very, very considerately. I consider that word because when you get into the depth of Judaism, and it's deeper and it's deeper and it's deeper. And in fact, this week, we're learning a halacha that when you pray, and we all pray to Hashem, the prayers must be aimed to the highest level of Hashem, to the Ein Sof, to the deepest level, because we can get trapped in sort of trying to imagine or define God, which we can't. So the journey has been from where I would say, I put it in a funny way. It went from rock and roll to Rashi and Rambam, and in that sort of strange way. And I'm going to title this little talk Crossroads, because all of us come to crossroads in our lives. And the key question for all of us, and for me, at that time, I was a young, successful young filmmaker, married to a wonderful, beautiful wife, and grew up with 2 children. I thought I was okay, and I thought that the world had treated me well, and I was treating the world well. But things began to dawn on me that I was living in some sort of an illusion. And it was strange to sort of be successful, fly around the world making films and advertising films, and a gnawing feeling in your tummy that, wait a minute, there's something going on here that I don't have a handle on. Now, to put this in perspective, I have lost count, but in those years, I flew around the world 114 times on assignment as a filmmaker in mileage terms, and had fun times, had interesting times, had erudite times, had tough times. And at a point in my life, I began to realize that I was walking into a really serious crossroad. Who am I actually? What am I actually doing? What is really my purpose in life? And it wasn't a midlife crisis. I got through that when I was about 40 and bought myself a sports car. That was gone by. So let's start sort of at the beginning. My parents were born from Eastern European immigrants who moved to Africa in the late 1800s. My grandmother came from Scotland, and there were Jewish immigrants to Scotland at that time, Sunderland. And my grandfather came from Eastern Europe, and they came as immigrants to Durban, South Africa. Now, you must know that Durban, South Africa, in those years, it's still a pretty rough place, but it's the home of the Zulu nation. And I was born into a completely unusual culture relative. At that time, I didn't think it was unusual because I was born into it. But as I grew older and as I moved and lived in London and lived in New York, I realized what an exotic and very intriguing and interesting life my parents had been born into and I'd been born into. So I'm going to ask Avram to flash on a picture of a Zulu impi. These are Zulu warriors who are known as the warriors of Africa. There's a massive history of their king, Shaka Zulu. And if you look at their mouths, there's an amazing thing that happens in South Africa with the Zulus. We speak and we sing. There's a time to sing. There's a time to speak. Amama, ngomoze me mama. The Zulus speak, sing, click, mamazi, imema, ipume tegweni, au kunjani mlungu. So you're born into a vibrancy that is not as usual in other countries. Maybe the Italians, when they get a bit excited, are sort of like that. So that is where my parents were brought up. That's where I was brought up. And I'm going to show you, my father met my mother. They married at an older age. You met my niece the other day, Alex Fletcher. Her mother is my sister. And this is our parents' wedding. Avram, could you just bring up the wedding? Okay, this is photographed in a place called the Durban Jewish Club. It's a magnificent building that still exists in Durban. At the moment, it's an emergency COVID center in Durban run by a friend of mine. And I want you to look carefully at the picture. Extreme happiness is on the face. Most of the faces, put it that way. But can you see a yarmulke in sight?
Yeah.
Now, this is one generation ago away from Europe. The Yetzer Hara, the Satan, is the force that is so overwhelming. And if you face it with ignorance, there's very little chance, unless you get blessings from grandparents that come through to you in this generation, there's very little chance that you're going to be able to sort of resist this tidal wave. Assimilation is nothing but the Yetzer Hara trying to take you down. And if you take a majority of secular Jews today, when I lived in the United States for 20-something years in the film industry, and I met so many really nice Jewish boys, girls, actors, directors, who knew virtually nothing about their Judaism. And in that stage, I wasn't as knowledgeable, and I don't claim to be knowledgeable. I very much feel that I'm at an infant stage of gaining knowledge. Is that what chance have they, especially their children, of resisting the Yetzer Hara, who comes in the form of the movies, the Charleston, the boogie, the sports car, money, having a good time? It's so hard to fight it. And if you don't have some knowledge of the value of which you're going to fight it, it's going to be very, very hard. I want to quote, I made a film with Rabbi Beryl Wine on the Rambam, Maimonides. You'll see a bit of it later. And in Maimonides, his first thing in his Mishnah Torah, it says, you should know God. Now, let's divorce our preconceptions, as I tried to do in the early stages, of what and who and God was. Because when you get into the religious definitions of rules, regulations, which are all highly important, we sometimes don't focus on the essence of knowing who God is. I heard a very humorous drasha once. It says, when you go for a job, Ashley, or you tendering for making a film, you send in your resume. What's the American word for it? Your whatever, your curricula vitae. And it says, I went to this college, I did this. And it says, who taught you to do that? He said, God did. He walks into your life and he says, look, I don't expect you to, at the first beat, sort of know who I am and follow my commandments. So just let me give you my resume. I'm the guy that made heaven and earth. I made the sky, I made the sea, I made you. Now, you may not believe it, and it may take you a very long time to believe it, but I'm that big guy in the sky who is mystical, indivisible, totally an enigma. And when I speak to him, and I quite often sort of give him a full go, because there are things that really puzzle me, and he's the source of the puzzle, and I'm the source of not knowing how to solve the puzzle. Who is God? And that question sort of smacked me in the face at a point in time. So let me just step back a little bit. Let's move from the picture of the wedding to see the groomsmen at that wedding. Avram, could you just show the groomsmen? Isn't this a picture right out of The Great Gatsby, everybody?
Yeah.
Handsome. My father's the second on the left. His uncle is next to him, who died at 99. His brother, my grandfather, died at 101 and a half. His sister died at 103. His elder sister died at 105. They were doing something right. And so my dad, second on the left, is a doctor. He got married late, in his late 30s, in early 40s. My mother was in her late 30s. And next to him is my mother's brother, a really handsome, lovely man. And next to him, with that lovely smile on his face, is a man called Dr. Herbert Kay, who was the premier eye surgeon in South Africa at the time. And he was the man that got me into photography and into cinematography. But a little more about that later. And then there's a cousin on the right-hand side. So look at the beautiful carnations. Let's accept that the top hats are yarmulkes, but in truth, they were there because of the style. And when I think back, these were all good Jews in the normative definition of Jews, but Judaism demands a higher level of us. And in this city, Durban, the Sitra Achra, the Satan, whatever you want to call it, hit us like a bombshell. Why? It's like Miami and Durban. The beaches are great. In those days, I was a lifesaver. My parents sent me, like my sister, to a Catholic school. Why to a Catholic school? My niece told you, because my father, who was born in Kimberley, where all the diamonds came from in South Africa, was sent to a Catholic school, and there the Catholic brothers gave the children the best education. To take a sidebar on that, my father was the doctor for that school as well. And he went to the brothers, the priests at the school, and said, listen, my son is Jewish. None of this catechism stuff and all that funny stuff. Give him a good education. And they did. When they did catechism, I stood outside the door. And one day, Brother Patrick, who was my main teacher, came to me and he says, Lazarus, I want to be talking to you. I said, yes, Brother Patrick. He says, listen, there's a bottle store about 2.5 blocks down the road, and I get 2 bottles of gin every week. Now I want you to go and get the bottles of gin, my boy. Forgive my bad Irish accent, everybody. So I said, Brother Patrick, I'm only 12. He said, oh, they know that. And then why me, Brother Patrick? He says, because if you tell your Jewish parents I'm knocking back 2 bottles of gin, they won't think a thing about it. The Jews love their wine. But if you tell the non-Jewish parents I'm drinking 2 bottles of gin and teaching their children, I'll get into trouble. So I was the runner for Brother Patrick. Now that story doesn't stop there. Brother Patrick calls me aside one day. He saw me got beaten up. I, at that time, was the only Jew boy in the school. They used to call me Jew boy. And then another Jew boy arrived. But I sort of took it with an equanimity. I don't know. I never was negative about being beaten up. I sort of had an neshama that, you know, I looked at the bullies and said, there's something wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with me. And so that sort of helped me through to a degree. One day, Brother Patrick says to me, Lazarus, I'll meet you down in the basement in the gym. Okay, Brother Patrick, what do we do in the gym? You'll be seeing. So I go down to the basement. There he's in a black cassock with a white thing and red boxing gloves. And he's standing there like this. I said, Brother Patrick. He said, put on the boxing gloves. I said, brother, he says, they're going to beat the, I won't use the word, hell out of you, he says. So I'm going to teach you to box and defend yourself. Brother Patrick and I had a really good time. Anyway, at a point in time, when my mother always believed that there was a God. Her trajectory towards him was highly unusual. In our home, I think we had every Buddhist, Taoist, Scientologist, Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers come to our home. And my sister and I, who were sort of normal, sort of stared at this oddity of people. And psychics would come into our home. And this is where the seatbelts have to start to tighten a little bit. My sister and I were sort of exposed to a whole variety of spiritual people on different directs and different ways. And I was not a part of it, nor was my sister, but we were intrigued by it. Anyway, coming out of Maris Brothers and coming out of that, I went to university. No, in fact, jump backwards a bit. As a lifesaver, my parents were very worried. I was mixing with all the non-Jewish lifesavers. And the Jewish boys, to me, were spoilt boys in my town. They drove cars when they were younger. We weren't a rich family because my father was basically a philanthropist who opened the first black clinic, saying, which Alex told you, that there are enough white doctors for the whites, but there are not enough good doctors for the blacks. So my father opened up a clinic, and they called him Dr. Jabula. Imama, Dr. Jabula, to see how they would say it, which means Dr. Happiness. And he used to come back, as Alex told you. My mother went catatonic. He used to come back and she said, did you have a good day, dear? Meaning, did you earn any money? And my dad said, yes, I got 2 chickens, about 12 bananas, and a box of eggs. My poor mother used to, you know, it's one thing helping the world, but, you know, so we weren't the richest family on the block. We were happy, but the boys and girls in my society were pretty spoiled. So they decided to send me to a boarding school, an English colonial boarding school, where again, I was a Jew boy. In the summer holidays, the school had an epidemic of polio, and we were kept in school through the summer holidays. And I was locked in for like 3 or 4 months. And all I wanted to do was study and get out. I'll skip the rest. I spent a year in Europe, hitchhiking around Europe. I graduated school a year younger than my peers. I graduated school at 15 and a half, and I couldn't be let into university until I was 16 and a half. Then, flipping back, I just want to show you from where my parents, who also, their parents became very wealthy. They were in the shipping business. They built a mansion in Africa, which is unusual in the 1920s. If you could just flip on that for a second, Avram.
Oh, nice.
So that was our home that was built in the 20s. That's my uncle standing in the foreground, a la Gatsby. And then they bought Sir Mortimer Singer's, the man who invented the Singer sewing machine's private yacht, if you could show that. There's our family's private yacht. And my grandmother took over the business and turned it into shipping merchandise to the islands of Africa. Now, that's the background my mother and father came from. And my mother, who loved the social life, but she met a man whose values were more outward, not critical of my uncles, but my father was more grounded in chesed and doing good as a doctor than making money. But my mother loved the high life. She dragged my father to the races, if you could just show that picture for a quick second. There's my mother and father at the races. My mother was a real fashion lady. And how does a lady like this seek and deal with so many psychics and Buddhists and Taoists? Because fundamentally, we were discussing it once, there was some emptiness in my mother. And whatever love and relationship between her and my father was, which sometimes got pretty rough, they argued quite a bit, she was seeking something to fill that emptiness. And so my sister and I observed adults, especially my mother. My father just plowed on being a good doctor. And off I went to university. My father wanted me to be a doctor. My mother didn't want me to be a doctor for obvious reasons. And eventually, my uncle introduced me to medical photography. And I started to work at university to pay my way through university as a medical photographer. I then hitchhiked up Africa and down Africa and photographed it like National Geographic, and then went to schools and asked them to donate money, and that paid my way through university. Cut. I meet a very beautiful and lovely lady. I was the one who wasn't sure for a long time. And eventually she said, well, you're not sure? I'm going to go off to Europe for a holiday. After 6 weeks, I had had enough of it and realized I really wanted to marry her. I sent her an air ticket by American Express. She emailed back. I drove 1,200 miles to the National Airport from Cape Town to Johannesburg. And when I was in the waiting area of the airport, a friend of mine from university, doctor, I said, what are you doing here? He says, I have a telegram for you. And it said, dear Ashley, I'm not flying back on your air ticket. I'm coming back when I feel like I'm coming back. And that's been the cornerstone of our marriage from day one. She pops the balloons and I keep blowing them up. And she keeps popping them. And we're still married after 58 years. Now, let's get down to the ikka of this background of contrast between a father with chesed, Zulus who spoke with this dynamic body language and energy, and the spoiled Jewish kids of Durban. I was on the beach in Cape Town when a young man who I knew very well was with me, was sitting on the beach, very reserved. And I said to him, Jeffrey, what's wrong? He said, something very strange happened this week. My father is a deep trance medium. He's a psychic. And this week, I was in a seance with him, and a boy came through in the seance and spoke through my father and said, my name is Jeffrey Wundmuller. I was killed 2 weeks ago falling out of the back of a truck. I want you to go to my parents who are Holocaust survivors and tell them I'm in a very, very good place and they're not to worry about me. And I looked at Jeffrey and I said, Jeffrey, what did the parents say? And he looked at me, he said, I haven't had the guts to even look if there is a Wundmuller family in Cape Town. So other than seeing my mother, I'd never had hands-on experience of transmission from what is supposedly the other side. So we left all the bikini girls on the beach and I took him up to the Macollet at the top of the hill. We looked at the phone book and there was one Wundmuller. We phoned the number. Is this Mr. Wundmuller? Yes, German accent. You don't know us, but it's something to do. Did you have a son called Georgie Wundmuller? He burst out crying. I looked at Jeffrey. Jeffrey looked at me. I said, he said, he was killed 2 weeks ago. So I said, could we come and see you about something about Jeffrey, please? So he said, yes. So we drove, it was about 20 minutes from that beach in our swimming costumes and t-shirts. And we knock on the door and there's an old Jewish German couple. And we sit down and Jeffrey starts to tell the story. I mean, the mother was in tears. The father was like, and I was like a bit aghast because I'd never experienced that this existed or really understood what it was. And when he said, please don't worry about me, I'm in hands of God, his picture on the mantelpiece flew off the mantelpiece and crashed into the floor, breaking into smithereens.
Wow.
The mother went to get a broom and a scoffy to sweep it, crying her eyes out. Well, you can imagine two young guys. I was 23, youngly married with a baby daughter. And this was like, what is going on here? So we became very friendly with the windmillers. And out of interest, I started, and my wife joined me. We found a group of psychics in our home city of then now Cape Town, where we were at university. And we began to understand the world of psychics. I also went to see Jeffrey's father and said, explain this to me. Now, here's where the Sitra Achra really gets us. Is the bottom line is very simple. If you don't know who God is, that means you don't know anything about yourself properly. You might know facets of yourself, but are these entities exist? Who answers those questions? What causes it to happen? I intellectually dove into this, and after a longish period of time, sort of began from the outside to see into it. Now, I have to contrast this dramatic entry into Tighten Your Seatbelts with the life I was living as a filmmaker. So I'm going to switch you on purpose to the commercial world where my soul made advertising films, but I made very certain, not out of intellect, out of just pure instinct, that I couldn't make deceiving adverts. I couldn't make adverts that were sexually provocative. My soul steered me to make adverts that were wholesome and entertaining. So you've just had the experience of what went through then. The next morning, I'm on set making a film like this. Please hit 3M. The Humanity of Children and a Coach. You going for it, Avram? There's no sound, Avram. There's no sound. Unmute me. Unmute. Okay, just run a little bit. It may come in.
If we don't have sound, Ashley, maybe
Do you remember the times when someone was there for you? Someone who encouraged you and taught you lessons that went beyond the game. Lessons about dedication, persistence, fair play, and friendship. 3M salutes Canada's coaches and pledges our continued support for the junior leagues so that these ideals will live on.
So on one side, I'm now going on a spiritual journey that has dark sides to it. And in the daytime, I'm making these sort of wholesome films and trying to balance these two lives. I want to run you M&Ms just to give you, again, seeing the humanity of what I draw out as a director within small advertising, in contrast to the rest of the story which I'm about to tell you. Go, just hit M&Ms.
Close your eyes, take a look at the day. Shut the door, you're a million miles away. Turn off the phones, let them wait for a while. Open your hand and smile. Open your hand. Save the moment for an empty rainy day. Hold the little things, don't let them slip away. Follow your daydreams, they won't go out of style. Open your hand and smile. Open your hand. It's the little things you like. Don't let them slip away. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la.
So you can hear hidden in there, the composer that is a Frum Jew, and we wrote lyrics. It's the little things in life. So seeping into the work were messages that, and Jordan Kaplan, Yehuda Jordan Kaplan, the composer, and I sort of were looking at our professional work and our Bolsheva life that was starting up and sort of trying to reconcile the two. Let's jump forward. At a point in time, I and my sister started to feel there was something out of balance in our lives. Something was not right. On top of it, she wasn't feeling well, nor was I. And she, by that time, emigrated to the United States. And she also took a journey into trying to look for answers like her mother did. And I looking more from an objective point of view, trying to understand all of this. And she became involved with crystal healers in the United States. And she kept phoning me about crystal healers. I said, but that's very like witch doctors in Africa, where they throw the bones and they look into the bones. Now, you must know that witch doctors in Africa and shamans in the United States are considered holy men. And I'll introduce you to two of them in a second. They are not Hollywood witch doctors, and all that stuff. They really are serious about connecting to the upper worlds. For example, the Zulus believe there is only one God. The head of the Sioux Nation tribal religious leader, Frank's Fool's Crow, who I'll tell you about in a minute, says there is only one Wakantanka. There is only one God. So, as you can hear from me, Judaism isn't in the picture. I've had a bar mitzvah. I go to shul, and people are talking about Mitzi's fur coat and the new Rolls Royce that they've bought. And I can't reconcile Judaism with any of the spiritual depths that I'm witnessing. So I was introduced to the top witch doctor in South Africa. He's a published author. He died recently at over 90. And his name was Krida Mutwa. And I said to Krida Mutwa, I said, I'm making a film about a black and a white child. I made a feature film at the height of apartheid that just ignored apartheid. And by showing the friendship between a black and a white child, it showed the underside of South Africa, where whites and blacks did not hate each other, and that there was a rapport. And the film at that time, to take a sidebar, was the second highest grossing movie under Star Wars in South Africa. And Credo Mutwa threw the bones. I went to him to advise me about the witch doctor in that movie. He threw the bones. He said, there's something very strange happened to you and your family. He said, your father was a doctor in Africa. Now, I didn't tell him anything. I think I'm remembering it okay. And the black witch doctors, they're good and white, meaning good and not good witch doctors, were very jealous that a white doctor was coming into Zululand and healing their people. And they put negative energies onto your family. I said, you got to be kidding. He said, no. And I see in the bones that these negative energies have to be fought. I'm prepared to fast a 30-day fast and go into meditation and fight these negative energies. Okay, everybody, you're Jewish. What are those negative energies defined as in Judaism today, right? There's a word for them, it's just gone out of my mind. And so, but I was flying overseas on an assignment the next day. There's this and there's M&Ms. On my plane, I fly and I'm introduced by my lawyer to a lawyer in Los Angeles who's going to talk to me about helping raise funds to make movies. And my sister dealt with crystal healing. I'm going to try and make this short. There was a crystal around her neck. I looked at the crystal. I said, what's that? She said, I'm training to be a crystal healer. She said, in fact, I studied with an amazing woman in San Francisco, and she trains me. I said, does she understand other worlds, psychic worlds? She said, you better believe it. I said, do you mind if I call your teacher? So in Hollywood, in those days, there were no cell phones. They brought a phone to your table. So there's the rock and roller from Durban sitting in a posh hotel with a phone being brought, phoning a psychic healer in San Francisco. I say to her, you know, I have something that I've been told by a healer, a witch doctor in Africa, and could I consult with you? But I can't come to you. Could you come to me? She said, Mr. Lazarus, I'm very, very busy. I can't for a few days. I said, well, I'm flying in 2 days. She said, let me see what I can do. I'll phone you back. An hour later, she phones back and she says to me, the strangest thing has happened. All 10 of my pupils have canceled in the last hour. Now, my training and cynical background says she smells money, but I was wrong. She said, you won't believe it. I heard your voice. I'm actually in a taxi on the way to the airport now at 11 o'clock at night. She flew down from San Francisco with a box of crystals. I woke my producer up, said, listen, would you order a suite for us? And I may not be early on set tomorrow morning. And she came down and she laid me on a bed and she put the crystals all over me. And she went into some sort of deep, and she says to me, you're from Africa. That I had told her. She said, something very strange happened to you in Africa. I said, oh, really? Now, I am smart enough, not that smart, not to reveal anything. I'm trying to learn. So I said, what are you talking about? She says, I don't know how to express this. I've never seen it in my life, but your spiritual energy, which termed in Eastern is called a kundalini, it's running backwards. It's not running forwards. Something happened in Africa to not just you, but your family. Now, this is 2 affirmations coming from 2 uneducated sources about what we were. she said, but it's way beyond me. I said, listen, my sister knows somebody in Atlanta who's trained by Dr. Reese in Kansas. She said, Dr. Reese is the most famous crystal healer in the United States. Go to Dr. Reese. I said, well, I'm stopping in my sister's hometown, Atlanta, and I'm going to see the intermediary, Dr. DeTrinco. We go to Dr. DeTrinco. He puts me on the couch. He puts the crystals on me. And then he does a thing called kinesiology. Kinesiology is a sort of known technique. There's a chiropractor in Gimel that practices it. You lie down and you put your arm out straight. I don't know if the camera can see. You put your arm out straight and he leans on the arm. If it buckles, it's no. If it locks and it won't go down, it's yes. So it's some form of the body or spirit telling the healer yes or no. He starts asking questions. And he gets to one question. He says, this is very strange, but I don't know why I'm asking this question. Did something happen to you and your family in Africa? 3 times in a row. This is getting a bit much. So I say, he said, wait a minute, don't. And he presses on my arm. Not only did it lock, imagine I'm lying on my back. Try this sometime, anybody. He puts both hands on my arm and I lift him off the ground. It isn't an affirmation of locking. He like went white and said, holy mackerel. He said, I've got to take you to a remarkable woman in Atlanta before you see Dr. Reese. Let's try and get deeper into this. So my sister and I go with him and we meet this woman. We sit down, she takes my hand and she looks me and says, something very strange happened to your family in Africa. Oh no, oh, wait a minute, who paid you all? What's going on here? She said, I've said nothing to her. My sister's sitting there. She said, your father went under the house with a black manservant called Albert. And they went in to kill a deadly snake. I looked at her. I said, really? She said, yeah, that's what happened. I said, would you excuse me for a minute? At that time, my father was alive. So I went, I said, may I use your phone? I'll pay for the call. I phoned my dad. I said, Dad, sorry, I'm going to be very abrupt here. When we were growing up, I know we had black manservants, but who was the main black manservant? He said, what was his name, Dad? He said, Albert. Dad, did you and Albert ever go into the house together for some strange reason? He said, yes, a black mamba, a deadly snake, went under the house and you 2 children play under there. So Albert and I went in there and killed the deadly snake. No. This is getting a little ridiculous. So I sit with her and she says, well, you know, I then tell her about Krida Mutu and she says, well, you've got to do meditations and various things and this spell has got to be broken. Switch. My technique in life is whenever I'm looking at something, especially when I'm making a film or trying to learn something new, I look at it from 180 degrees, the opposite way. Not what I think and what it is, but what is the opposite way of it? So I looked at this, I said, what's the opposite way of this? I said, I don't know anything about this. I'm totally lost. My sister's totally lost. But it seems as though there's a world that connects with you and tells you amazing truths. Why, what for, but you begin to feel empowered. Your ego begins that somebody's telling you truths that you would not have known. And at the bottom line, if you look at it objectively from 180 degrees, Yiddishkeit played no part in this journey at all. And I said to myself, something's really strange here. I then go, I'm doing research on a film on the American Red Indians, and a famous author called Thomas Mail wrote a book for Random House called Frank Frulskrow. In the book, he talks about American Indian spiritualism. I phone Thomas Males. He says, I'll fly with you to South Dakota. I'll book on a plane. You'll get on the same plane in Kansas City. I come down to breakfast, a trafe breakfast, and I'm sitting there and my hand starts to shake like this. I'm looking at my hand, it's totally out of control. And it goes down into my satchel and pulls out paper and pencil, and it starts to write without me in control of it at all. And it writes, this is Frank Fool's Crow. Do not come on Route 69 or whatever it is. Come on Route 94. It's too dangerous. 2,000 guards will come with you. I stare at my hand, and I've now personally had some sort of psychic revelation. It's all Ossa and not allowed in Judaism. But what is not allowed is the Yetzer Hara is pulling you down a track where God is allowing you to go down. And if you don't know it's not right, you suck it in. I look at this note, I get on the plane, I meet Thomas Males, and I sit quietly for quite a long time. And he said, you're a bit quiet, Ashley. I said, Mr. Males, I know I've read the book on Frank Fool's Crow, and it's what remarkable. I show him the note, and he said, oh, that's normal. I said, why are we going on this route? He said, because there are riots, and Frank Fool's Crow is dealing with Congress because of how the Americans are treated. It's terribly dangerous on Route 69. I said, what's this 2,000 guards stuff? He said, he's surrounded by 2,000 guards. We go to him, we sit down, he looks at me, he's 90 years old with white hair, and he stares at me with his gray eyes and he says, aren't you Jewish? I said, yes. He said, what are you coming to me for? I said, because I'm on a journey. He said, you have a spirituality deeper than everyone on the planet, young man. He said, I'm going to send you up to the holy mountain, but first I'm going to light the peace pipe. And he said, Ashley, what is a peace pipe? I said, it's a peace pipe. He said, no, it isn't. When we light the flame in the pipe, we're uniting heaven and earth into a point. And that's when we connect at the highest level in our prayers to God. At that moment, my body went into freeze frame and I started to cry. I was immobilized for 20 minutes. I couldn't move. I was literally like this. Thomas Males is staring at me. Frank Fool's Crow's just sitting quietly smoking his peace pipe. After 20 minutes, I come out of it. He said, go to the holy mountain. Bottom line, try and find out who you are, Ashley. I go from there. I have to cut the story really short. I go to see the healer in Kansas City. He says, I'm taking a whole lot of healers to Israel. I said, I can't get there. I'm on a movie. He said, you'll get there. We shot the movie, finished it 2 days earlier with a lot of extra money left over. You can't take money out of South Africa. I fly there, and on the plane, it says, go to Sfat. Go to Sfat. It's your spiritual home, my handwriting. Go with my daughter, try and find somebody who can answer my questions. I walked into a yeshiva in jeans and a baseball cap, and my daughter with green hair, I think, and he wouldn't talk to me. I said, I'm a Jew, I need help. Who understands the spiritual side of Judaism? He said, I said, you've got to help me. And he sent me to a rabbi called Yerich Meir. He said, it's all normal what you've gone through. I said, I beg your pardon, it's all normal. We fly in a small plane down into the Sinai. Israel had given back the Sinai to the Egyptians, and we landed on an ex-Israeli Air Force base. And when we got to the customs there, they wouldn't let me in because I was South African, and South Africa was an apartheid state, and you're not allowed into Egypt, so you'll sit here. But on the plane flying, my hand wrote, stand at 10 o'clock facing this degree, 10 degrees, whatever, west, north, east, whatever, at 10 o'clock exactly. So I go to Dr. Rees and I say, this is what my hand wrote. He said to me, normal, okay, normal. I'm standing in the airport, I'm looking at this group of healers. Some of them are chiropractors, a couple of them are doctors, 2 or 3 of them are Jewish. And I say, I don't have a watch, I never wear a watch, and I don't have a compass. They all burst out laughing. I'm standing on a ceramic compass that the Israelis have put into the floor. A doctor hands me his watch, off they go, and under armed guard, I'm sitting outside, and at precisely 10 o'clock, I stand up and I face north, and my hand starts to write. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. I stare at it. I happen to know what it is. I went to Cheder as a child. Sit down for 2 minutes, come back again. What is the most important word in this? Echad, Echad, Echad. Ashley, you're a Jew. Go find out who you are. Well, to tell you how the story ends, I was still uncertain when I had become very close friends with the head of Paramount Pictures, public relations of Paramount Pictures, and we were talking about making movies together. We were good friends, and he was very ill, and I met him through Dr. Rees. Now, Dr. Rees channeled that he would get better. The psychics that I dealt with, Krudamuta, he'll get better. The woman that we went to in Atlanta, he'll get better. I was with him 1 week before he died. He was skin and bones. He will get better. And now I'm standing, looking at this, and 1 week later he died. I'm now at an absolute crossroads in this journey. Who's telling the truth? How do I arbiter the truth? And later I found a marshal that when you hit a crossroads, the marshal says, you look at this particular marshal, under the brambles was the old sign, wooden sign with 3, one going this way, one going this, and one going back. And you pick up the sign, and the sign, in this case, said Jerusalem. So you turn the sign and point it to where you came from. When you put it in the ground, you now know where you're going, left or right. And the bottom line of this, I know we have to cut it short. I'm sorry I'm going so long. It's a very long story. I realized that there was really knowledge to be gained. We were living in New York. I met a rabbi. He introduced me to Rabbi Mordechai Scheinberger at Tzaddik. He said, you should come and see me. That was at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I was in New York. At 6 o'clock, I was on a plane to Israel. I went to Mordechai Scheinberger and I told him the story. He said, it's normal. It's normal, okay. I said to him, Rabbi, he said, Ashley, what do you know about God? What do you really know about God? He said, you seem a very nice young guy, but he said, ask me any question. I said, okay, I'll fire one off. Do we reincarnate? He pulled out the Sid and he said, read the bedtime Shema. I forgive anyone in this transformation or any other transmigration. And he lifted my neshama with the gentlest of hands. And he said, Ashley, I said, Rabbi, he said, listen, what you've gone through is the Sitra Achra and Hashem pulling at you all the time. But you have the trigger, you have the choice. The highest level of spirituality in Judaism is not to go and meditate. It's to face reality, Ashley. And when you face reality and you solve it and go through it, you rise to the next level of spirituality. That I went back, I met Mordechai ben David and Gabbai of the Remnitzer Rebbe. They got me a bracha from the Remnitzer Rebbe and another Rebbe called the Stashever Rebbe, long stories. And Gershon, after having tea with me, the one Gabbai, walked down to the street and he said to me, Reb Usha, you're not wearing a yarmulke. I said, listen, I'm trying to find what this is. He said, Reb Usha, you're not wearing a yarmulke. And I looked at him and I said, I'm a good Jew. He said, there are good Jews, Ashley. Then there are good, humble Jews, Ashley. And then he started to cry. Corner of 9th Street and 60th in New York City, standing. He doesn't say another word and he's crying. I look at him, I say, Gershon, is it that important? He says, you better believe it, Ashley. So do you happen to have a yarmulke? He said, I always carry one. Could I have it? I took it and I've never taken it off. Now, other than thanking HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the story ends where Rabbi Scheinberger and a certain other rabbi said to me, and I have to finish it off on my remarkable wife who lived through all this. He said, Ashley, it's very simple to understand. We get conned all the time in the world because the world is not pure. It plays God. It doesn't refer and be observant to God. He said, how does a con man con you? He gets to know everything about you. He befriends you. He tells you truth after truth. You begin to trust him. Then somewhere along the time, he cons you. He says, who do you think the Satan is? Satan has all the power and the knowledge of everything in the world up to the throne, the Kisei Kavod of Hashem. He is the agent to give you the choice to look at yourself, to choose good, not to choose evil. And he's going to pull you down with the truth, Ashley. And I realized I was home. I just want to pay respect to, and I'm very emotional about it, to an amazing lady who had to live through all of this with a smile, with pricking my bubbles at every turn, raised our children while I was flying all over the world. She took her own journey when her mother died. And we looked at each other and said, from this week, we want to be Shomer Shabbos. We found our daughter at the Hebrew University and we said, Vadi, are you sitting down? She said, no, Daddy, are you sitting down? I said, okay, she's met a boy. No. She said, Daddy, you're going to think this is crazy. But I'm at the Hebrew University and what's going on with the young people here and the value systems, that's not how you raised us. You're going to be very shocked and please don't be upset with me. But as of this Shabbos, I'm becoming Shomer Shabbos. What do you want to tell me? So Mommy and I looked at each other and said, Vadi, from this Shabbos, we're keeping Shabbos. Have a good week, everybody. Thank you.
Oh, wow, Lazarus, that was an unbelievable story, unbelievable. And I'm going to open it up now, if you permit. Please, if you have any questions, please unmute yourself and ask Ashley now.
I just want to say it's amazing.
Please don't end. There's so much more I feel that you have to say.
Can we
Part two,
have
Ashley.
it one more time, a continuation of a
Yeah.
Yes.
Part two.
Listen, it's the first time I've ever spoken publicly. My wife is nervous.
Where is she? Where is she? Bring her on.
You had us in the palm of your hand the whole time. My gosh.
I hope I conveyed it with the respect that the story is due. The rabbi told me some great-grandfather, grandmother did a chesed or did something and Hashem opened the window to you and your wife. So all I can say is Todah, thank you. And thank you for listening. I was very concerned how to tell the story and not to go into some of the gory details because they are gory details. I don't want to tease you about them, but I think I put
Yeah,
it
you
across.
did a very good job.
Is
Thank
there a book in the making?
Everybody's driving me mad. You know, I produced the book, Incredible. I made a film on Rabbi Wallace and I put him together with Nachum Seltzer and produced that book. And Nachum's been driving me mad wanting to write a book. And my children are driving me mad. And I would like your opinion. You don't have to answer now, but you can answer through Joyce. I feel it's responsible for me to tell the story because I've met so many, especially Israelis after the army, running to psychic and Indian gurus and running away from their own spirituality because nobody's ever taught them who they really are. I want to read one thing. Can I read you one thing?
Please do. Ashley, I just want to. I'm getting through on my chat now. Tell Ashley this is what he was born to tell.
I want to read you one thing. Forgive me, I can't see properly, so I'm going to have to use. It's from a book a doctor who wrote. It's called Joyous Torah Treasures, which my wife and I study the two books. We've reread it about 6 times over the last couple of years. This is, it's from Parshas Eikav. Hashem chose the Jews to be a holy people to him, and he washed, and he, forgive me my eyes, and he wished to make them worthy. He therefore guided and ordered them onto the ways of kindly grace and compassion. And he appealed to them to adorn themselves with every desirable and precious character trait, to find favor in the eyes of all who behold them, that they should say, these are the people of the Lord. And as we attain these good character traits, the good favor of God will be bestowed upon us, for good will extend to good persons, and evil, my words, will leave the world.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Beautiful.
Ashley,
I want to say, sorry, go on, Joyce.
it truly was not over the top. You said it the way it was, and it was truly inspiring. And I do think, in my humble opinion, that this story should be told because there's a lot of kids out there that could really benefit from hearing it. Go ahead.
I just want to say something. I'm Ashley's sister who kind of took the journey with him, and what he's leaving out is the influence that he's had on so many people. Unbelievable. I mean, he and his wife hosted so many people in doing outreach in New York, but on myself and my husband, and you heard my daughter's story 2 weeks ago, we wouldn't be religious if it wasn't because of him. And we have friends. I have a friend now watching, Rochelle Shenda. She wouldn't have become so religious if it hadn't been because of us. And we have other friends we've influenced. So it all came from Ashley, and it was his journey.
Thank you for saying that, Bev, because I've always wanted to say that when Alex was talking about Abraham, and if it wasn't for your brother, really, this would never, he was a light to all of us. Thank you, Ashley. What an unbelievable story.
Thank you, Renee. I love you.
Love you too. Thank you.
I want the first autographed copy. I'm ordering it now.
So I was asking a question. I would only write the book if it had a purpose. And the only purpose is to perhaps hold a mirror to people who don't understand that they can be empowered by the psychic world and suck it into it. So that would be for me, other than my children want the story told for their children. Do you feel that this should be a book? I mean, it's a sort of rhetoric question, but how do you feel?
For
I'm
sure.
Yes.
Leave it to Nachman Seltzer. He's a great, great writer, as I'm sure you know. Just leave it to him and he'll get everything you want in there and make a point.
I would like
Okay.
to add something. I would like to add something that Ashley and Beverly's story is not just inspiring for people who go far away and then come back. Because I didn't go far away. I stayed always close, and their lives and their story has been so inspiring to me. I'm sure there are people listening on the Zoom now who have been from their whole lives. And you know what? It can become very routine. And knowing them and listening to them has inspired me to really appreciate what Yiddishkeit can be. So you don't have to be far away to be inspired by what Yiddishkeit came to mean to them. So I want to add that I think a book about their journey can be inspiring to everyone, not
Right.
just to people who are.
Right.
Very well said. Well said, Leah. I
Yeah,
agree with
Thank
you.
you.
I
Every
agree
word.
too.
Yeshakayach, Yeshakayach.
I have a question for Cynthia, if you're comfortable answering, Cynthia. If not, that's perfectly fine. How did you cope with all this? Tzedekis, that I know, like a tzedekis, but
No comment. No,
Yeah. I'm sure.
I just basically I take one day at a time. It's always been the way I am, and there were times that there were things that made my hair stand on end. Baruch Hashem, I now cover it so it doesn't stand on end. Yeah, there were times when things were beyond strange, but we've got this far. And as Beverly says, you still talk to each other, so Baruch Hashem also.
Abraham, can you put up the picture of Cynthia and I getting married?
Ah, yes.
Are you there, Abraham?
I think we lost.
Fine.
I think he went AWOL. Okay, next time we'll see the pictures or
I
somebody.
just want to say, we are so fortunate to have you in our community. It's a tremendous asset to all of us. Shekayach.
Thank you, Rita.
It's a wonderful story. I just have one question. These people, all these seers and the Indian and the woman with the crystals, that you said she didn't charge anything. She wasn't in for the money. And the Indian witch doctor,
None of them.
to help you find truth as well. Do you think they're lying to you? Do you think they were lying to you?
Did they what me?
Lie.
Lying to you. You
Were
said
they
that all
lying
these were false.
Lying? No, they weren't lying. No.
They have their own endless.
No,
They had the truth.
they reflected. Look, the woman from Mexico is an unbelievable story. If we can tell it in 1 minute, I'll tell you. She was a top journalist. She was sent to poo-poo a Macumba conference with doctors and witch doctors. And there were about 700 people at the conference, doctors and Macumbas. These are Brazilian, not Mexican. And she fell asleep on the first night of the lectures. And she said, this is boring, and she's going to poo-poo, it's all nonsense. The people next to her said, no, you've got to come back tomorrow, but bring a video crew with you because you're going to see something extra special tomorrow. So she came back the next day and promptly fell asleep again. When she woke up, the whole room was staring at her, and her cameraman's jaw was on the floor. They had videoed her go into trance. And she had suppressed all her spirituality and was this trance psychic. And she believes it totally because the other side has empowered her.
Hi, call me after your meeting.
You can't trust it.
Okay, darling. Bye-bye.
You can't trust it. And the bottom line is when you get to that crossroads, if you don't do your homework, you can be One of my best friends growing up is a guru in Cape Town. And I said, Abi, how do you know it's the truth? How do you know it's the truth? And, you know, the thing about the Torah is when, like one of the channelings for me, I would open up a Bible. In those days, it was every Bible was lying around. And I read, you should kill the Hittite, the Jebusite, the Amorite, the Girgasite. And I said to myself, how many Jews want to kill people? This is ridiculous. And then my hand started to shake and it said, it means killing the negative enemies within yourself, Ashley. That's one level of what this means. Hittite is jealousy, anger. This is sexual perversion. This is ego. So before you do anything to the whole world, to come to the promised land, you have to attack those in yourself. So once you penetrate the depths of the Torah and it opens and reveals itself, I can't, and I'm not good at it. I don't want to have any pretense that I'm some scholar or anything. I battle with it. I battle to get up in the morning. I'm grateful to God when I go to the bathroom. I'm getting older. It's not an easy journey, but when you unpeel the onion, the flavor is true.
Oh, very nice line.
Okay. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you.
That book, Ashley. Write the book.
Okay, Rosalind, thank you for the opportunity of meeting Joyce.
Thank you for doing this. You gave so much to so many people, and you've certainly given a lot to me personally, as you know. So thank you.
Sure.
Rosalind, up to you again, my dear friend, for introducing me to Ashley. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ladies, I'd like to just tell you our next week guest speaker, Amit Hashem, is the co-founder of Torah Anytime. So he has an amazing story to tell us as well that I hope will truly inspire us too. So look forward to seeing you all next week, and thank you so much. And Cynthia, thank you too.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Thank you both.
Thank you from Israel.
And come again, Ashley. We want to hear you again.
Hi.
Yeah, we want part 2.
I didn't recognize it now. How are you doing?
Baruch Hashem, we're doing okay.
Thank you for my love.
Hi, Cheryl. Hi, Cheryl. Thank you, Ashley.
Love you, Cheryl.
Yeah, we miss you.
Love you, Cheryl.
We miss you.
You too. You're beautiful.
Bye-bye. Thank
Seeing you, Cheryl.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, so good to see you.
Thank